They told you what to think, how to behave, who to trust, and you believed them. But what if I told you everything you've been taught to accept was a lie, that the people around you, the systems above you, even the thoughts inside your head, were never truly yours? In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to reveal the truths they never wanted you to hear. Not because you're weak, but because they know you're powerful. This isn't just a video. It's a wake-up call, a warning, a mirror, and once you see what I'm about to show you, you can't unseen it. So before you scroll away, ask yourself, who benefits when you stay asleep? Stay with me till the end, and you'll never look at this world or yourself the same way again. The lies they built around you from the moment you were born, the world started shaping you, not into who you are, but into who they wanted you to be. They fed you rules masked as wisdom. They handed you silence and called it peace. They taught you how to follow, never how to lead. You were trained to be polite when you should have spoken up, to be humble when you should have known your worth, to obey when your soul wanted to roar. You were told to stay in line, keep your voice down, don't ask too many questions, because questioning their truth threatens their control. Every limitation you carry today, every doubt, every fear, every belief that you're not enough, it was planted, deliberately, slowly, repeatedly, until it felt like it was yours, but it never was. They made you think you're too sensitive, too emotional, too much, but that's because your light made them uncomfortable. Your spirit was never weak, it was just surrounded by people too afraid of its power, and that's exactly why they built this web of lies around you, to keep you from waking up to your own strength. Because the moment you see how deeply you've been manipulated, you become a threat, not to society, but to every system and person who built their power by keeping you small. This isn't about blame, this is about truth. Because once you identify the lie, you can destroy it. And once the lies fall away, what remains is you, raw, real, untamed, the version of you they feared the most. This keynote is your permission to break free. It's your reminder that your thoughts were never supposed to be cages, that your soul was never designed to kneel, that your silence was never your destiny. You are not broken. You are buried beneath years of false programming. And the moment you recognize that, you can begin the process of unlearning, healing, rising. So the next time you hear that inner voice of self-doubt, ask yourself, is this my truth or their conditioning? Because freedom begins not when you walk away from them, but when you walk back into yourself. And that moment starts now. You were born powerful. They just made you forget you didn't come into this world broken. You were born whole, bold, fearless, curious, and alive. You didn't question your worth back then. You didn't doubt your voice. You laughed loudly, you spoke your mind, you chased what lit your soul on fire, but somewhere along the way, they got to you, slowly, silently, systematically. They made you sit still when your heart wanted to run. They told you to be realistic when your spirit wanted to dream. And every time you tried to rise, they clipped a little more of your wings. Not because you weren't capable, but because your light intimidated the shadows they lived in. The truth is, you weren't weak. You were too strong for their comfort. So they covered your power with doubt. They masked your instincts with guilt. They labeled your strength as arrogance and your voice as rebellion. And over time, you believed them, but hear this now, everything they made you forget still lives inside you. That power is not gone. It's just buried beneath layers of fear, shame, and silence that never belonged to you. The truth is, they had to convince you that you weren't powerful, because a person who remembers their power becomes impossible to control. That's why the world constantly tells you who to be, how to act, and what to fear. It's a system built on forgetfulness. But today you remember, not because someone gave you permission, but because your soul is done sleeping. The pain you feel isn't weakness. It's your power knocking, begging to be unleashed. It's the buried parts of you screaming to be seen again. You don't need more fixing. You need remembering. You need to reconnect with the fire you were born with, the one that still burns beneath every scar, every disappointment, every lie they told you. That inner fire is still there, waiting, and when you finally stop apologizing for it, you become unstoppable. So today, look in the mirror, not at the reflection they shaped, but at the warrior underneath. The one who's rising, because once you remember who you were before the world told you who to be, they won't be able to make you forget again. Your obedience kept them in control. They never needed chains to keep you quiet. They used expectations, guilt, fear, approval, and you followed, thinking it was strength to be the bigger person, the peacemaker, the one who held it all together. You kept your head down to avoid conflict. You stayed silent to protect peace, but in reality, your silence protected them, not peace. Every time you let something slide, every time you gave more than you received, every time you swallowed your truth just to be accepted, you weren't weak. You were trained to obey, to keep the machine running, because your obedience kept them comfortable, kept them in power, kept the illusion alive that they were right and you were just too emotional, too dramatic, too much, and you believed it. You wore self-betrayal like a badge of honor, thinking you were being loyal, kind, selfless. But what if I told you that loyalty to the wrong people is just another form of self-destruction? They counted on your silence. They built their comfort on your sacrifice. But every time you made yourself smaller to make others feel bigger, you were feeding the very system designed to break you. And now your soul is exhausted, not because you failed, but because you've been carrying a weight that was never yours to hold. This keynote is your awakening, a call to stop confusing obedience with peace, silence with wisdom, and people pleasing with love. You were not born to kneel to false authority. You were born to stand in truth, even if your voice shakes, even if you stand alone. Because here's the secret: once you stop obeying the unspoken rules that keep you stuck, you start rewriting the rules of your life. You stop reacting and start reclaiming, and when you do, the people who only loved the version of you they could control will fall away. Let them. You're not here to serve their comfort. You're here to honor your truth. The moment you stop playing the role they assigned to you, you become dangerous, not to the world, but to the lies that kept you bound. And that's when you finally taste freedom, not the kind they gave you, but the kind you give yourself. You were never meant to fit in. You were built to stand out from the beginning. They tried to make you blend in, to walk, talk, and think like everyone else. They called it normal, safe, acceptable, but deep down, you always knew you were different. You felt things deeper, saw through the masks, questioned what others accepted without hesitation, and for that, they labeled you too intense, too emotional, too complicated. So you tried to shrink, you tried to adapt, you tried to make your light less blinding just to be liked, to be included, to not be left out. But no matter how much you compromised, it never felt right, because it wasn't. You weren't created to be a copy of everyone else. You were built to be a disruptor, a force, a voice, a spark in a world full of sleepwalkers. They made fitting in look like success. But what they never told you was that fitting in often means dimming the very parts of yourself that make you powerful. You weren't born to be average. You weren't meant to walk paths that have already been walked. You were meant to leave a trail, loud, bright, undeniable. Your uniqueness is not a flaw. It's your fingerprint on this world. And the more you try to erase it just to please others, the further you drift from your purpose. The truth is, they fear what they can't control, and you were never built to be controlled. That's why your presence feels too loud in quiet rooms. That's why your ideas challenge the norm. That's why you've always struggled to fit, because you were never supposed to. You were sent here to shake things up, to challenge comfort zones, to awaken something in people that even they forgot existed. So why hide now? This keynote is your permission to stop apologizing for who you are. Stop diluting your truth to be digestible. Stop editing your soul for people who will never understand your depth. The world doesn't need another echo. It needs your voice, raw, untamed, real. When you finally stand tall in your difference, you become magnetic, not to everyone, but to those who are waiting for someone just like you to remind them it's okay to be different too. The moment you see the truth, you become unstoppable. There comes a moment, a quiet, terrifying, powerful moment, when everything clicks, when the lies no longer hold, when the masks start to slip, when you realize that the pain you've carried wasn't yours. It was theirs. The shame, the doubt, the fear, planted in you by broken people, toxic systems, and a world that profits off your confusion. And in that moment of clarity, everything changes. You no longer beg for validation. You no longer seek permission. You no longer apologize for existing fully, because now you see, and once you see the truth, your truth, there's no going back. You become untouchable, not because life gets easier, but because you stop letting it define you. They can't manipulate you once you see the strings. They can't control you once you see the game. They can't break you once you realize you were never broken. You stop playing roles. You stop performing for approval. You stop shrinking for comfort. You step into a version of yourself that is dangerous to everything false and magnetic to everything real. You begin to speak even if your voice trembles. You begin to walk away from what doesn't serve you, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because now, you understand that peace was never meant to cost your soul. This is the birth of the real you. The version that no longer chases, but attracts. The version that doesn't live on survival mode, but on purpose. The version that doesn't fear being alone, because you're finally home within yourself. And from this moment forward, your presence becomes a mirror. Some will be inspired, others will be threatened. Let both happen. Your job is not to make people comfortable. Your job is to live in your truth loudly, boldly, unapologetically. So let this be the moment where your story shifts, where your silence ends, where the version of you that always knew, always felt, always hoped, finally takes the lead, because the truth doesn't just set you free, it sets you on fire, and once you're on fire with truth, no one can dim your light again. Not them, not the past, not even the fear inside you. You've seen the truth. Now rise and never look back.